Welcome to the Clearly Well podcast. I'm Elizabeth McKeon, a board-certified psychiatric mental health and addiction recovery nurse. This podcast aims to bridge the gap between mental health and substance use discussions, fostering understanding and empathy while reducing stigma. Join us as we amplify the voices of those with lived experiences, creating a non-judgmental space for their stories to be heard. Thank you for tuning in. Okay, guys, welcome to the Clearly Well podcast. I have Kayla in the house again today for episode 2 of her journey to excellence, and we have Brittany Rockmore in the house. Hi. All right, Kayla. So I'm going to just sort of do a little repeat. And for listeners, guys, there was a first part to this. So if you're tuning into episode 2, you're going to want to go back and listen to the first part of Kayla's story. We have just arrived at Kayla, has been in a terrible car accident. There was drinking and driving involved, probably some drug use. They fled the scene. Kayla's bleeding and broken and has just found out in the hospital that she is pregnant and has had to now turn herself into the local detention center. So take it away.
Awesome. Yes. So, I am pregnant at this point, and I am really excited to have a baby, very scared, but excited to have a baby because I feel like this is the love that I have been searching for my whole life. And I just remember being like, I'm going to love this baby so much, and this baby's going to love me, and it's just going to be enough to change everything. And it did for that time. So at that time, while I was pregnant, I built my life up. I mean, I worked really hard. I went and got my GED. I saved up money, was getting us a place ready for like when I deliver. His father was now being sentenced to prison. So I knew that he was going to be gone and I was going to be a single mom, but I was okay with all of that. And so I stopped doing drugs. I stopped smoking cigarettes. Like I was just like, I had enough willpower at that point to say like, I am going to do everything I can to be a good mom, because I just wanted to be a mom. And I was like, I want to be a good mom, and I'm going to just show everybody, because this is, God has given me this chance at life, kind of, I guess, is kind of like the idea that I have going on in my mind.
And you've got all those mommy hormones flooding in.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I just stayed so focused on getting prepared for him to come that I think it allowed me to not have to worry about like this whole part of my life of like all this other stuff that had happened, because I just set my mind to something. And so at this point now, my friends that are graduating high school, my best friend that I said would come and try to find me and take me to school and stuff, now she has gotten bad on drugs. So it was really hard, because at this point, like I would be in like a house and people would be like doing dope all around me, but I would just be like, everyone knew like Kayla was pregnant, like don't pass her the pipe,
right.
Like, keep the pregnant girl would be like in the one room and everybody's out here like tweaked out of their mind doing drugs and everything. And I thought that was normal, like, because I was like, okay, I'm saying no, like I'm not doing
You're
this.
not like going through 12-step program or anything at this point,
Oh, no, I've never heard of that.
Okay.
I've
at
never
this
even,
point.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't even know what that is.
But you're just like got your mindset, you're not doing that.
Yes, I have my mindset, I'm not doing that. I was just like, save money, go to my doctor's appointments. I still hung out with my friends because I didn't see them as bad. I just was like, I'm not doing those things. And they understood that and they respected that. But I was still, nothing changed in like the people I was hanging out and stuff like that. It was really just like my mindset had changed because I wanted to be a good mom. And so my whole pregnancy, that was like kind of like the theme. And as I was getting ready to deliver my son, like my friends were getting like really bad on drugs. And so it came to a point where like I kind of had to separate a little bit from like certain people, because I didn't want to like obviously like have my child in the dope house where there's like smoking meth and all this stuff. So I ended up getting my own place. I had my son. It was like the most incredible thing, you know, delivering him and everything. Now I did have a lot of shame. And I remember feeling that like even in the hospital, because I felt like everyone looked at me because I was like this young girl. I didn't have a dad to sign a birth certificate. Like I was just having this child, and it was like obviously coming out of like, you know, being strung out on drugs and all this stuff. And so I just remember feeling like very ashamed in some ways, but also like really happy that I just had this beautiful baby. And I felt like people treated me different too. Like I didn't feel like the nurse, like I didn't feel like I was given like love
from the nursing staff or from the staff that came in. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm a nurse, so you know, I always try to take that in and think, how can we be better nurses? You know, how can we be more supportive? Because for your information, a little bit about my background is that I opened up ER holding area for psychiatric, mental health, and substance use disorder. We had 13 beds, and I often had pregnant women on my unit that would be on a substance, whatever substance that might be. And I started really noticing during that time that the nurses would get angry if that pregnant female would ask. Everybody's got allergies in the house today, man. Everybody's coughing and sneezing, and okay, just FYI for the listeners.
Doors opening.
But no, I mean, I started hearing this from the nurses. They would say things like, "Can you believe she wants her prenatal vitamin? Give me a break," you know. And I would have to sit that nurse down and be like, "Look, she wants the prenatal vitamin because that's one good thing she can do today for that baby. Yes, she is on these substances, but she also loves that baby."
Yeah.
You know,
That's why
and
I try to treat everybody with kindness. You never know what somebody's going through.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's so true. And honestly, like when I look back now, like I would have wanted to breastfeed. Nobody there would like sit with me and show me, and I was just scared and was like, my baby needs to eat, so I didn't breastfeed. I gave him the formula. But I just felt like nobody had the patience to like walk me, like I was a child having a child, you know, and there was already so much shame in that, but I was also like, again, like excited to be a mom. But so it was like it was kind of like this conflicting thing that was happening in that room, and I just didn't feel like, I felt like everyone was judging me.
Right, and they probably were.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, and you know, you should not have been denied a lactation team. That's pretty standard protocol in having a baby, and you know, that's pretty normal, even back in the day when I had a baby.
I know. I don't know why.
Yeah, that saddens me so much. You know, I know that. Let's face it, not everyone gets into the medical field for the right reasons. Some people think there's a lot of money involved. I don't know where that came from. But, I mean, yes, I mean, it makes a decent salary, but that should never be the reason somebody goes to nursing school, ever. And I've seen it time and time again, especially as I moved into leadership in nursing, that I saw that there were nurses that just absolutely had no business whatsoever being in the field. So, and so, especially with COVID, I think a lot of nurses got burnt. Like really burned during that time, and I saw attitudes flailing, but this was before that, so I don't even see that as an excuse or a reason. Yeah. Not that there should be an excuse or a reason ever.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry you went through that.
Thank you. You know, at the time I didn't really know. Now I do, like the benefits of all of these things. Like if I had a child now, it would be so different, obviously, because I didn't know these things. I didn't have somebody sitting, guiding me through that process or like showing me kind of the ropes. So, I look at things now and I'm like, dang, you know, I wish I would have done this and whatnot, but it is what it is. So I had my son. It was amazing. We moved into a place together. I was working. I was taking care of him. All the stuff, you know, being a new mom. Obviously, it's stressful because my son was colicky, and it might have been even because I think that children are impacted like in your belly, like while you're pregnant. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
definitely,
my son had already experienced a lot of trauma, you know, from just even being pregnant in my stomach, car accident, drug, like all of these things that he had experienced. And so I believe that those things do impact. And so my son was very colicky, what is the term, you know, that everyone said, or he just cried a lot.
For listeners, that means he cried a lot, you know, and yes, I mean, he he did endure what sounds like a lot, but it sounds like as soon as you knew, you really just tried to do everything the right way.
Oh yeah, for sure. I absolutely did. And I love him so much. And so I put all my love into him, but at the same time, all these other things started to come up at that time. And so now obviously you have a kid, your hormones and stuff is kind of off. I'm also 18 years old, so I'm still really young. All my friends are still hanging out partying. A lot of my friends are doing drugs. And now I have a child, but I still want to kind of be a mom, be the best mom I could be while still having a social life, partying and things like that. So they kind of start to conflict.
Do you think you were experiencing any postpartum depression at that time?
Honestly, I think that I was experiencing all kinds of stuff. Depression, yeah, maybe. I feel like I never dealt with the traumas that I had experienced. So I had a lot of trauma. I had a lot of feelings that had just stacked up and stacked up and stacked up on each other. And then I go and I have a child,
Right.
and I've no therapy, no recovery, no dealing with any of those things. But now I'm just focused on the next thing that I need to do.
Right.
And so with that, I didn't process any of that stuff. So of course it came up. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to drink. I'm not going to do meth. I'll just drink, smoke a little bit of weed, with my friends, once I get my son to sleep, we'll just kind of hang out.
It's just alcohol.
Yeah.
Right.
Just alcohol. So that's when I became a raging alcoholic.
Okay.
Yeah. I legitimately used alcohol as an excuse that this was like acceptable. And now I'm not even at the drinking age, but I'm
Right.
grown because now I have a kid. I've been to jail.
Yeah.
I've done all these things, and
You're
I'm
so grown.
I'm so grown. Yeah.
I mean, I struggle. I have conversations with people all the time about alcohol, and it's, I've had conversations with people say, alcohol should not be allowed.
Yeah.
Alcohol should not even be a thing, and I'm like, well, I drink. I don't drink, like all the time, but I drink. I like to drink. What does that make me? Does that make me an alcoholic? Like, you have to put yourself in check, right? But then I really see the difference between folks I've interviewed that drink and the way that they drink.
Correct.
And I think there's that.
Yeah.
That there's a turnoff point. One thing I have learned from the people that I interview is that that turnoff point doesn't exist.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
For me, it was called a blackout point. And at
And
blackout,
I
I'm
hear
still
that.
drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah. So, and that's really how I drank. I drank to black out, and there's so many things that like I don't even remember. Wake up in hospital beds, wake up in houses where I'm like, who
Bushes.
are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, woke up in a bush. Cops found me in the bush. Like, there's so many parts of my story that like are going to be left out because I don't know what happened.
Right. Yeah. And the reason I brought that up about alcohol is like my husband brought up to me the other day. He's like, well, you were drinking a beer the other day at such and such restaurant. And I said, so? And he said, should you be doing that with your podcast? And I said, first of all, I said, I am not going to not be me because I'm doing a podcast. Second of all, I'm not coming on here and telling people don't drink alcohol. I'm not saying if you are prescribed a benzodiazepine for anxiety and you take that as directed that that's not okay.
Right.
I'm also not saying that if you're prescribed an opioid painkiller because you have some intractable pain, you're an amputee, you have had back surgery. I mean, whatever that may be or whatever that looks like does
Well,
not
some
make
people are able to go to dinner,
Correct.
have a beer, and
Right.
go home, and it's no big deal.
Right.
For
Correct.
me, however,
It was-
What
yeah,
did that
'cause,
look like?
to drink in excess,
And then
which
pair
drugs
that
are
with other things?
Yeah, drugs are always a part of it. But and a lot of people act like the alcohol isn't scary, but it absolutely was. And I know you hear me joke a lot. Oh, if I have a drink of liquor, I'll be at the dope man's because once you get some alcohol in you, you just start feeling fearless, and you
Well-
think that you can do these things. You think you can drive a car, and then you come up with these obscene ideas, and like none of it makes any sense. Like looking back on it now, it's insanity.
Well, see, this is where I get into the change brain, right, Sean? I always talk about change brain. So you think about the mesolimbic system. I say it on every podcast. It changes through drug use and excessive alcohol use, and that mesolimbic system is your decision-making tool. And so it's turned off. or it's really skewed. It depends on how much use there has been of whatever substance or multiple substances there has been. So it is different. It's different for those that do not have substance use disorder and those who can say, okay, enough is enough.
Right.
But you've
And
even seen awful things happen to people that are successful, and they go out and they,
like
and some on-
Justin
off-
Timberlake yesterday. My goodness,
yeah.
let's talk about that. He's my idol, and Justin, man, come on, you were in the Hamptons, dude. And I can say because you're all over the news, and I love you, and I've been to all your concerts. But I mean, at the end of the day, he made a really poor choice.
Yeah.
While his beautiful wife, is there filming in New York, and so there you go. You know, and so now he has a consequence to deal with. So I mean, I think, there's that. Alcohol's great for me.
It is. And I always say, it depends. Every person's different, and so I always ask people, when you drink, think of also why you're drinking, and if you're drinking with this desire to get out, escape feelings, or as to self-medicate and things like that, then have a little concern because,
Right.
And then how much use, right? And can you really set it down?
Yeah, or was it because you were in the studio at 5.5 hours in a row and said, I'd really like a mimosa?
Right.
So that's, I don't know. I just feel like, I think through the podcast, though, it causes me to always be recognizing my own behavior, making sure, am I masking something? Whatever.
But that's good insight. And I always ask people, if people focus on that, because people can drink and be successful and it not be a problem.
Yeah.
And I don't see anything wrong with that. I'm not going to be like, oh, you should stop drinking just because I can't. I choose not to drink.
I have a friend who calls it bandwagon sobriety, that once you become sober, you then expect everyone in your life, friends, family, et cetera, to be sober with you because you have this new hyper awareness of what can happen.
Right.
But it's not going to happen to everybody.
Right.
And I think that you're smart to recognize that, if that's in your family trait, if that's a hereditary factor is always there, and it's something to always be recognizing and aware of.
Yeah.
And we do have it in our family on my dad's side, his dad, to my knowledge. I never knew him because he died really young, but it was, to my knowledge, he was an alcoholic.
Yeah. But yeah, so for me, whatever the substance was, I had that addictive gene, it just didn't matter. I was always doing things to that extreme. There was no Kayla drinks a glass of wine at dinner and just stops right there. It was just on to the next thing, which then always led me back to drugs.
Yeah. Well, that's really good self-awareness too. I like that.
Yeah. And at the time though, my self-awareness was not there. It was a lot of denial, and so I felt that I was entitled to be able to do what it is that I want to do. And so drinking was something that was socially acceptable. So it was okay if I drank.
Yeah.
And every time that I drank, to the degree of blacking out and something crazy would happen.
That was a Kayla-ism. She said it was okay if I drunk because she was drunk.
I was drunk, very drunk, very, very drunk. The consequences that would happen, I would just feel a lot of shame.
Right.
I would just continue to pack on that shame. Essentially, what ended up happening is it led me back to drug use. And I started to kind of go down that rabbit hole again. And so a lot of the things that I had built up during my pregnancy for my son started to fall apart. And those consequences started to come. I started to see the shift. I started to feel the depression. So when I wasn't drinking and partying and things, I started to feel really sad. I started to feel worthless. I started to feel like a failure as a mom. Some of the memories of my trauma would come up, and it just kind of drove me to just feeling really depressed. And so what I ended up doing was throwing myself back into substance use. And I started using, and I was at this point I was drinking a lot. I moved out of that trailer. I was kind of hopping around, and like Brittany said, I would always have my son with me. So he was lived with me through it all, and I thought these were very normal things. I didn't think it was anything wrong with it, but I would just move from house to house. I ended up with getting engaged to someone that we were partying. We met at the bar, and he kind of had his stuff together, but he was an alcoholic. And so I was like partying at his house, and I would literally bring my child to his house, put my child to bed up in the upstairs room, and then party downstairs with everybody. Like that was normal. And then we ended up getting together, getting engaged. I moved in there. That quickly fell apart because it was all wrapped around, you know, alcoholism and my addiction. And I was a mess, and I was wild. I would have parties. Brittany was there all the time, and I would bring people, and she would be a part of our parties and stuff like that. And then
wow, I didn't know that.
oh yeah.
Well, he was kind of he was older and
He was a lot
successful-ish.
Yeah.
But
he was a lot older than me.
yeah, a lot
too.
older.
But I also was
But
thinking
he had the money, and he
correct.
had the house,
and he could take
and the
care
pool.
of me and my child, and I would still get to
Do all
have
the
my
things.
use. Yes. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of like, you know, a pretty smart move for me at this time. So I did that, but it just didn't last because it was chaos. You know, it was straight up chaos. So burnt my life to the ground there and decided I am going to move back down to South Florida, and I'll go live with my mom, and I will get my life together. I called her crying. I was like, look, like right now me and my son are homeless. We're literally like living house to house, and I need help. And so I go down there, and I am just like, okay, I'm going to get into school. I'm going to go and become a nurse and do all this stuff. So I started school down in South Florida. I started to work again. Here's the kind of the theme. I'm going to start like working towards a goal, kind of work hard at stuff because I'm really good high achiever. And my son is young, and I'm living with my mom. And now I'm going out in South Florida, you know, where it's like, real
Party
deal
Central.
party central. Yeah, so it's totally okay because now I got it together because I'm in school. I've got like a roof over my head. I'm not with
And
anyone.
I mean, let's face it, you're absolutely gorgeous. You're in Miami. You've got the Miami look about you.
Yes.
I'm sure that
So-
that was working to your advantage.
Oh, it was. Yeah, it was. And I got caught up in all of that. And I was putting my son to sleep at my mom's house and going out for this nightlife. So it really was like I was living this double life because I would like try to be a mom during the day. And then once it was, you know, once the sun went down, it was like, woo, you know, and I'm going out doing the deal. But
Where are you going to South Beach?
oh my gosh, no, I did not go to South Beach. South Beach is like such a tourist. You know how like when you go to places, it's like the tourists
I
do
used
that.
to go in the 90s.
Okay, so I would go to downtown Fort Lauderdale where, you know, the whole, you know, walk the strip, the bar scene, all of that. And then I found a lot of like different like hole in the wall bars too. And I would just be out like all
Let
night.
me just say this about her. When she says blackout, like drinking excess, what I'm telling
yeah,
you
Brittany?
is she would get lit, drunk beyond what a small person of her stature should have.
Yes.
And then I
Like,
don't know
I
where
could
she blacked
outdrink.
out, but I could tell you that she would be, and we don't know, we would laugh and joke because she would just be in stilettos, but still upright. And
I don't know how I didn't break my ankles, honestly, because I would be so drunk. Like,
so drunk.
yes, like got kicked out of bars, did crazy stuff. People would not be friends with me the next day, like type of drunk until
We
they
joke about the bush. She had passed out into a bush out on the street, and the cops found her and thought she'd been like raped. And
yeah. And then I woke up in the hospital. My mom would be like crying, and I'd be like, what the hell is going on? And then I would like leave there and be like, everything's okay. Like, okay. Like, and I'd be like one day of just feeling so ashamed, like disgusting, wanting to die. Cause every time I would like come down, I wanted to die. Like it was just this, I wanted to die. That's how I would
wish
feel.
I could have known you at that time and made sure that you got the right help.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thank
That's
you.
so sad.
Yeah, it really was when I think about it. But it was such a facade. Like, it was really a facade because although I felt like that, I would then go out, you know,
Right.
and put on the whole do and go out.
that's so the truth, because I would remember so many times like that and feeling so much shame and what have I done? But it's very short lived because you'll feel like shit about it for a minute, but then it's right back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
Right back
worst.
to
So
it.
then you try to shorten those periods of feeling like crap by elongating the periods of being just completely, you know, drugged up or wasted because you're now self-medicating so much more than just like depression and all this stuff, there's like so much shame built into it, and you really don't. I hated myself. Like, I legitimately hated who I was. And at the end of the night, when everybody would go home, all the liquor's run out, there's no more drugs, I laid on a floor, I cried, and I wanted to take my life. And that's how it was, and that was the theme of my life. And suicide, like, I have attempted to take my life multiple times. And it is truly by God's grace that I'm still here. Because literally, when I tell you God has intervened on me attempting to take my life, he has intervened.
Well, that's because you were meant to be the person you are today.
Yeah, for sure.
So how old are you when this is happening now? You're in Miami, in the hole in the walls.
I'm 20.
So depressed.
Yeah, I'm about 20, and then I turned 21. Because all of this stuff all happened, I was always underage drinking. That's why a lot of my arrests are like underage drinking, DUI, like all of that stuff, because I was always like under the age. So now finally I'm 21.
So this is 10 years ago we're at. A decade.
Yeah, a decade. So I pretty much have all this shame built up living in South Florida from doing this whole alcoholism thing and waking up in all kinds of different places. I'm fighting with my mom because she's like kind of trying to tell me like, you have a problem, but she's also, I'm like, you got to watch my kid at night, while I go out, type of thing. And so I get angry. I'm very defensive. I kind of like say like just the meanest things, because I also was still blaming a lot of like my family for even like my adolescence. So I could be very just mean, and just angry. And so it would just come out in the things that I said. But really I was just hurting, inside. And I didn't know that at that time, but I knew that I was just like not nice. And so I just like decided one day, like, I'm going to pack up and I'm going to leave and I'm going to come back to Raven County.
Oh, dear.
Yes. And actually, I forgot to mention, baby daddy gets out of prison.
Okay.
So that's kind of leading up to that. So he gets out of prison. And
is baby daddy in Georgia?
Baby daddy's in Georgia.
Okay. So
yes.
We're going to see him.
Yes.
Okay.
So he gets out of prison.
Let's go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is where it gets good. So he gets out of prison. We've always been like, we would be separated and then we like make our way back to each other type of relationship. And at this point, he first got out of prison and he wanted to like get back together really quick and all this stuff. And I was living in Florida, but I wasn't yet ready to leave. And so I was like, I'm not just picking up my life and coming just because, X, Y, and Z. Like, you need to work on yourself, because I'm working on myself over here, just.
Now, this is the blackout drunk working on
yes,
myself?
Yes, this is the blackout drunk working on myself. But I was working for a very nice real estate company. So I still thought like, I had my stuff together, going to school. Like, it was like the facade. And so I was like, you need to get your life together. I haven't been doing drugs and, blah, blah, blah. And he's here in Raven County. And he has struggled with addiction and mental health, like from a very young age, like in and out of prison pretty much his whole life.
I was going to say that was his second trip. What she's talking about, the federal, was that not number two?
That was number two. But he had been in and out like from a juvenile age and never got like the help that he needed. And so when we met, like, we were just two really messed up people. But he got out of prison. So I was like, no, I've got my life together, blah, blah, blah. So then he ends up getting into a relationship with somebody else. So I got angry and I was like, how could you do that? Even though I'm like, seeing a couple guys over here, but it's just not known, So then I'm just like, I just woke up one day and was like, I'm going back to Raven County. And I had saved enough money, because that's what I would do. I would like work hard, hit a goal, save the money. And then I just like left, and I left my family high and dry, drove back with my son, packed my whole car full, and just like came to Raven County with maybe like $5,000. It might've been tax season. I don't know, something like that. And I was just like going to figure it out, and I came back knowing that he had gotten married. So in this short time, he like met somebody, got married. He was also like back on drugs, all this stuff. And his relationship was like unhealthy, like his marriage. And he would just still tell me like how much he loves me and like whatnot. So it was like kind of like this triangle love type of situation. And of course, he's like the love of my life. So when I found out that he got married, I was like crushed, because I just always thought like no matter what, like we'd end up together.
Right.
And so when I came back, I kind of feel like I knew in my mind, like we were going to get back together. But there was also this other situation where there was this other relationship.
This marriage.
Correct. Yeah. It was. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. There was legitimately, there was this marriage. And so I came back, but I also was like, wanted him to be a dad too. But I think selfishly, I know selfishly, it was like, I want him to be a dad, but I also have just always desired to be a family. Like even when he went to prison, like I wanted to be a family so bad. And I was okay with being a single mom and all this stuff, but I just always desired in my heart to like be a family one day. And so when I came back, it was like, okay, there's this situation, but he can still be a dad and whatnot, and we'll just like kind of work through that. But when we seen each other, it was like kind of all over. Because the moment that we saw each other, it was like those feelings came back for both of us, and it was just like so powerful that we were just like going to find whatever way to be together. Oh, and he's also on the run at this time. So he can't come into Georgia because he's on the run in Georgia. So he's living in North Carolina, wanted in Georgia. So he can't like cross over the line.
Okay.
So I moved back. So now I'm living here and I'm trying to figure out like, where am I going to live and all this stuff. Well, he ends up getting in trouble in Georgia or in North Carolina. So I'm like, well, I'll go buy us a house in South Carolina, because then you don't have to go in North Carolina or Georgia, and I'll just harbor a fugitive and we'll be this happy family. So that's what I did. So
wow.
So I go to South Carolina and I'm like, house hunting so that I can rent a place.
And you're like a real estate guru by now, so you know the lingo.
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely. I'm just like figuring it all out. At this point, I think I'm of age to drink at least. And so I find a place in South Carolina, and it was like this nice, like double wide trailer on this like beautiful property. And I was like, yes, this is the one. So I like go and I don't know how people like give me like keys to a place. Like back then it was a lot easier to rent than it is now, but they just, I signed it, was like, this is, it's just for me and my son, all of this stuff. Obviously didn't tell them that I was going to have, my baby daddy there. And so they give me the papers, everything. So I sign it. So then me and him are like, at this point, like secretly seeing each other. And I like let him know, okay, I got the place in South Carolina, like we're ready, blah, blah. So he ends up like leaving, his situation and his wife and everything. And he comes to South Carolina, and I'm just like, so excited because we're about to like be this really happy family. We just cannot cross the border of Georgia and North Carolina. And if we do, we take all the back roads. So I learned how to drive really well. And we just, I really, never used the main road. I just always used the back roads. And that's how I learned how to drive all in these mountain areas. And so we get together. Of course, we're now both like back on drugs in that chaos. And it was chaos.
I feel like I need to describe Rabun County to our listeners.
Okay, go ahead.
So when we talk about North Carolina and South Carolina, you have to understand that area of the United States is butted right up against Franklin, North Carolina, and the area called Highlands, which is a very, very highfalutin part of North Carolina. And then on the South Carolina side, you basically just take a hop, skip, and a jump over into South Carolina, and you're at Clemson University.
Yeah, we're at 10 minutes from each.
Yeah, so I mean, literally, it's what she's describing is not difficult to do. Just letting you know.
No, yeah, it wasn't difficult at all.
She continued to drive. She continued to drive like that until she got clean. Just by the way.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're living in South Carolina, but our life has, like, I don't know if you've heard this because you've had other people talk, but when you go back into your addiction, it's almost like it hits harder and harder every time. So when I get back on the dope, because, right now I was just like a classy alcoholic, and I literally go in and I go hard. Okay. And so we are living a life of straight chaos, and we are living together. And so that beautiful like idea of this family white picket fence is like really chaotic inside. Domestic violence, gang stuff, drug dealing, like everything you could think of is like happening within like my household and in my life. And so life progressively got worse at that point. And it even got so bad that me and baby daddy were like, we can't be together. We cannot be together because our love is just way too toxic. And not to mention, he was doing all kinds of our relationship was so chaotic, and he would be like out doing whatever, and then I would take him back, and it would just be like this crazy like still a love triangle cycle, all of that. And so while I'm trying to still raise a child, and be this mom. But so it was like a double life standard, because I was always trying to be like the best mom that I could be, because I've always like loved my child, wanted to provide for him and everything. But I had just all of this chaos, it was just like all of this chaos and these cycles and these toxic traits. But I didn't know how to like break all of that. So I just did the best that I could. And so I finally was like, we break up. I moved back to Georgia. I give him the house in South Carolina. I'm like, you can have it. And his ex-wife moves in to that house. I moved to Georgia. I'm starting to work, in Georgia, trying to like rebuild my life from this relationship. But me and him like cannot separate from each other. So even in the midst of that, we're still finding our way like back to each other, even though we know that we shouldn't be together and all this stuff. So it was just like a very toxic relationship, the most toxic relationship I've ever been in. But I've just always loved him so much that it just like drew me back.
Right.
And on top of that, I didn't love myself, and I didn't really know what love was supposed to look like. And so it's just like, this was just like the only kind of, this was love, and this was my idea of love, and I didn't know anything different, but I just knew that I loved him.
Well, even if, I don't know if you've ever listened to Bill Mitchell's podcast, When Dating Hurts, but that podcast really gets into what intimate partner violence and domestic violence and, all the things with narcissism and all that stuff. And even when drugs and alcohol are not involved, that cycle of domestic abuse and that powerful love in that inside of that is a whole thing, and a whole addictive thing all on its own.
So addictive. Yeah. And it's so, I agree with all of that, because that was probably like stronger than the drugs themselves, And so, and I recognize that, and we were both so broken trying to love each other in the midst of just like such chaos and toxicity.
Well, when you fuel violence and with a drug and alcohol, that's the worst. That's the worst toxicity that there could be.
Yeah, and it was. And so a lot of like my trauma then around that started to build up again. So that's when, so I left, and things seemingly got better, but they weren't really getting better, because I was still really bad on drugs. I was like working at the bar. Now I was selling drugs, because when we were together, we were doing it. And then I realized like, well, he kind of struggles with this, because he like does all his drugs, but I'm actually making money. And so I was like, I could do this. Like I could do this on my own. And so I started to sell drugs, and I was making money off of it, and I was still doing drugs, but I just was like smarter business wise, I felt like, when it came to selling. And so that was kind of the facade as well, right? Like, okay, I'm paying for my own apartment. I have my own vehicle paid off. I'm buying my kid everything that he, desires, and then some. He has his own bedroom. Like, this is the facade now that I'm like, I'm doing it. Like, I'm doing okay. And so I even put that out, and people wouldn't even know that I'm on drugs. Or at least I didn't think that they did. But, I would tell myself that lie as well. And so my life was looking on the outside like it was getting better, but my gosh, was I like deteriorating inside. And so I remember I would like be in my apartment late at night, and when everything was gone, I'm sitting there by myself, I'd be like crying on the floor, wanting to die. My kid's sleeping in the next room, and so it was like this feeling that I would get when everyone's gone and the quiet came in, and I would just be so broken, like just so ashamed, so just like, why, like crying out. I was so angry at God at this point. I was like, I hate myself. I hate God. Like I was just so mad. But then I'd wake up the next day and put on the show. And so that, I lived like that for a little while. And then I got like another boyfriend. My baby daddy ended up getting in trouble. during this time, and he ended up getting arrested, and he got out. I got him out one time during that time where he got arrested, and then he got arrested again. He got caught, like he made the newspaper, like he got tased and caught crossing the border, and that was it. Like he was going away for a little while. And I knew that. And so I was like really sad about that. But I also was like, okay, this is going to be what helps me to get over him. And so in order to get over him, I was just like, well, I just need to get another boyfriend. So that's what I did. And so I got another boyfriend, and that boyfriend was also on drugs, but they were doing Roxy's. And so this was like where I would like sell dope to people, and they would be like into pills and stuff. But I was like, no, I'm just, I just strictly do meth and drink a little bit now. At this point, sometimes I'll smoke a little weed if I need to come down. But I was not like about the pills, because I had seen how people would like just sell everything and like do anything for a pill. And the fiending for a pill was so much greater than I felt like people fiending for meth. And so seeing that happen, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But I started dating this guy, and slowly but surely I started smoking Roxy's. And, at first I was like, like, what is it that's so good about this? And then I remember the first time that I did it, and I was just like, oh, wow, I know what's so good about this. And that was it. I tell people all the time, like, when I started doing opiates, that brought me to my knees so much quicker than anything else. And I didn't even recognize it, because it was like when I was doing uppers, it kind of like kept me going. And I was like I felt like it was making me almost like more productive. And it's like these lies that we tell ourselves. But the moment that I started doing Roxy's, it was like opiates like numbed a part of me that I just felt like meth couldn't do.
I'll say this from somebody on the outside. That's when I really watched Kayla become detached from reality, because like when she's talking about all this stuff, it sounds awful, but she is somehow staying put together. She had a car, she had a place, she had her son, he was taken care of, he had all of the things. But yeah, I remember watching her go through that, and she I'm gonna let her continue, but this is where I really watched her detach from job, license, life,
everything. Yeah.
And she would just be like, but I'm cool, and carry on.
Yeah.
You guys know how I feel about opioids. That's kind of like my mission in life, is I'm very anti-opioid. With that said, if somebody has a prescription, they can take it correctly. Good for you. But I know more people that cannot do that with that class of drug.
For sure. Well, that class of drug is dangerous whether you have whether you have whether you have addiction or not.
Oh, no.
It is such an addictive drug. And I understand too, because I know that people need to take things prescribed as, whatever.
Correct.
But I will tell you that I went to a lot of houses, to a lot of people that were prescribed that shouldn't have been prescribed that
Right.
drug. And that's how I continue to fuel my drug use of opiates. And I didn't even know that you could withdraw from an opiate until I was like sick as heck. And I literally thought I had, like, I thought I was sick. I thought I had like the flu.
Oh, yeah.
But it was because I didn't have that drug for a
Right.
period of time. But I didn't know this because I had never learned about opiates, Roxy's, or any of that thing. I just knew that I liked the way this felt more than anything, and I want more of it.
Yeah, I teach the opioid withdrawal scale, especially like in jail or on a unit. There's a lot. How do I say this correctly? So, you're not going to die from it, but it's extremely uncomfortable withdrawal.
Yeah.
Withdrawing off alcohol or benzodiazepines, you can die. With that said, sometimes I think law enforcement will tend to say, go ahead and let them sweat that opioid detox out, because they're not going to die.
Yeah.
But it is extremely uncomfortable. And on a crisis stabilization unit, there's an order set for that actually really takes the soma and a little bit of, for the stomach, the bentyl for the stomach. There's an actual order set that is for an opiate withdrawal to help with that. But yeah, if you didn't know.
I didn't know.
And
I withdrew a few times and didn't know. And I thought like I would get so sick And so then I was like, I'm too sick to do anything. And I would like withdraw. And then the moment that I was feeling better, I'm like, okay, I need to do drugs. Like, it was crazy. But that was like the first time that I realized that. And then finally I was talking to other people that were doing opiates, and they were like, no, that's withdrawal. And I'm like, oh gosh, I've never experienced that, because, you know, you do uppers. I've had alcohol, you're hungover, you know, like you're hungover for the next day, you feel like crap. So you drink a little bit. So then, you
Hair
know,
of the dog.
Yeah. Uppers, you are going to sleep for a few days, you know? And so I never anticipated like to be like sick, like flu, like just horrible, feeling like you're going to die, but you don't die, but that's a withdrawal.
Yeah.
So that was like when I started doing opiates, everything changed. The things that I had seen that I was afraid of, I started to see in my life. Like everything was trying to figure out like, how do I get $30 to get this pill? I was working in a restaurant, and I would literally like work enough to get $30 to get somebody to come bring me a pill that I would go smoke in the bathroom. And then I would, you know, wait my tables, all that stuff to try to make money to get that next pill. And I was just starting to like sell things, give things away, thinking of like robbing people, like so that I can get that next fix. And so I had never experienced to that degree, because I was a girl who like still had it together, even though I had this like massive addiction that was like a hidden addiction.
I really like the way you're breaking it down, you know, in terms of how each drug, what you feel like when you're not doing it and what you do to make it better. And the difference between drugs that we know are terrible, like methamphetamine, and how much worse the opioid was for you. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like Brittany said, like I started to detach like from everything. It was crazy. And like my brain, my mental health started to deteriorate. I started to feel so numb and like detached and disassociated from like the reality of things that I really cared about, including my own child that I loved so much. But this drug was so overpowering. Like the moment that I would wake up, it was like, I need my fix, you know? And so that's kind of how my life was like, that's how I was living. And at this point I was like living in this place that I ended up getting evicted from. Brittany actually showed up to help me move out.
She was so detached. Like I would stop and I'll be like, look at me for a sec. They're in 24 hours. They're coming to set your shit on the lawn. And she was like, y'all got this, and was out. And so we packed up all of her things for her and moved them somewhere, because she just was like somewhere else, like
one track mind,
detached. Yeah. And so we're like, just so she didn't lose all of her stuff. And I mean, when she says her son had a lot, like he had a lot. Like we had, oh gosh, there was 50, just, you know, 55 gallon track of toys. She had a lot of stuff, beds, couch, all the things. So like, so she didn't lose her stuff, you know. I was like, y'all, she's not in her right mind. She's not thinking right, but I don't want her to lose her things. So I called a few of my homeboys over there and got 3 or 4 of them. And we packed up every single thing in that house for her and moved it to a buddy's storage building for her.
Well, thank goodness for you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And she allowed me to come stay with her, because now I was homeless again. And what's crazy is that I had built up, and it's always like this thought of like just building up things. If I have things, if I have, you know, stuff to show for, then I'm doing okay.
Right.
And so once I started to like lose everything, I got to that point where I was like, oh my gosh, like what is my life coming to? And I remember at that place, like going outside and like putting a gun to my head and just crying and being like, God, I'm going to take my life. Like I need help. I don't know what to do. Like just crying hysterically outside. There was people in my house doing drugs at the time. So I go outside, I'm like crying, all this stuff, wipe my eyes, go back in, do some drugs. Like it was just like, and this would happen all the time. I'd have these like moments where I was like, my God, like I don't know how I'm going to get myself out of this. And I really didn't. I didn't know how I was going to get myself out of this. I was too ashamed to really ask for the help that I needed. And I was still like hiding behind this idea that I still like was in control. And so I would have these moments of like going outside and like crying and getting like close to just like taking my life. And then I would just like, okay, go inside. And then there it is, you know, like, let me just numb that. And so that's kind of what I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how old are you now?
Now I am, this was like 2015, 92. So I'm like 23, because at this point too, I have a open defects case on my son. So now I had one time that somebody called on me and they came out and they seen that I had all this stuff for my kid and everything was perfectly fine. And they were like, oh yeah, like she's a good mom. We're done. Cause I literally would show up and be like presentable, have everything going on, like total facade, double life standard. And then the second time when they came, I was like really bad on opiates and, you know, on everything else. But I also like my mental state was so deteriorated and like I was just like losing everything. I was on probation at the time because when I was living in South Carolina, I had like a night where I fled from the cops, had this whole police chase, ended up like roadblock, all this stuff. They locked me up. And then when I got out of that South Carolina jail, I like left because I was like, well, you know, just be a fugitive, you know, like I've seen everyone else do it. You can do it. You can probably do it better. So I went back to Georgia and then I got arrested a couple times. I got arrested for a DUI. There's so many times where God has like shielded me from like heavier charges. I don't know how I haven't gotten arrested for like a dope charge because the amount of times that like drug dealing, carrying dope, like it is truly by God's grace that I have not been in prison for longer than, you know, the time that I've done in jail, which is really nothing compared to like a prison sentence. But at this point, like I had pretty much like burnt all my bridges. I was on probation and I had this open case and I was running from them. So every time they try to show up at the house, like I'd leave, I wouldn't be there. They'd call my phone. I wouldn't answer. My son is now with his dad's sister because I at least knew enough sense to be like, okay, you're not doing good right now. Take the kid over here, right? Take my son over here and you need to like get your life together because every time I would see him, I would like fall apart because I'm like, I'm failing him. And I wanted so badly to be a good mom, but I was struggling so much with my addiction that it was like so hard. And it was so hard to face that because I just wanted him to like never have to feel the way that I felt. But I was like doing this cycle that I didn't know that I was doing. And it was like, I felt so upset because I didn't want that. And so my deepest desire was like, I want to be this great mom, but I'm totally failing at it. And so then I'm just like, I just need to die. Like, I just need to die. I don't need to be here with him.
Oh, sorry. Got the husband in the background.
Oh, that's okay.
Calling at such an important moment.
And so when they opened up that defects case and they like removed him from my custody, I just remember being like, this is it. Like, if they take him from me, that's it. I have nothing else to live for. And so for the longest time, they couldn't find me, but I was on probation. And so when I would show up to my probation officer, now, mind you, I don't have a license at this point, lost it because I got in DUIs and things like that. And I would drive there. I would like get out the passenger seat thinking I'm slick. I'd walk into my probation officer's office. I'd have dope in my bra. Go in there with no money and I'd sit there and, you know, just to meet with her because I had to. And she was like the person at that time that was like the only person that made me feel human when I felt so disgusting. And she could have violated me every time I walked in there and she didn't. We would sit down and she would just be like, Kayla, how are you doing? You know, like she just asked me like just normal questions that were just, it was just the way that she treated me at that time that made me feel like I'm still human.
As she should.
Yeah. And she was a saint. She was like literally an angel in that time. And everyone said she was like the hardest probation officer and all this stuff. But my God, I don't know what it was about her, but she just like genuinely cared about me. And I felt that. And so at that time when I was just like really struggling, I would go there and I don't know, she just made me feel good. And so, leaving out of probation one day is when the defects people, because they couldn't find me, they like met me there. And so they obviously like were then able to like tell me that they, you know, was taking custody of my son, all this stuff. And so from that point on, I was living with Brittany and I was just slowly like deteriorating inside. I had gotten a job and I was working a little bit trying to like figure out a way to like get out of everything, but I just couldn't stop using because I was so broken inside. My mom actually came up because she lives in South Florida. she heard of everything going on, and she came up here, and she had like never really ever been up here to like visit me while I was living here, because like her and my dad don't get along at all. And it was like this huge thing when I moved here that like created this like war in my family. And so she came up here to find me, and she came to that house right before I got evicted, and like it was like, Kayla, you know, Cooper, if you want me to get Cooper, I'll take him, and all this stuff. And she just started to like have this like serious conversation, because she saw me, and she was like, she said that like she just didn't know if I was going to be alive much longer, you know. And so we sat outside, because I wouldn't let her come into my house, because I was so ashamed of like what my house looked like. And at this point it was like, you know, a drug house. And we sat outside, and she just like told me that she loved me. And I remember she like, I laid in her lap, and she just like was like petting my hair, and she was like, I love you, and you know, if you want help, I want to help you. And then she left. And so I at this point was just still like not willing to surrender. I was so angry with like her and my family and everyone, because I was just blaming. I was not willing to like look at accountability and say like, you know what, I need help, and just kind of like let down my pride and ego and just like say like, please help me. So I ended up, you know, trying to like figure it out on my own, like I usually do. And then I remember getting to the point where I was just like, I knew like I lost like Cooper, I was losing custody of Cooper and everything. And I just remember praying to God and being like, God, if you don't do something, like I really just can't do this much longer. Like I'm broken. I can't do this. And I just said one of those like prayers to God, even though I didn't have like no relationship with God or anything. And it was probably like a week, that same week, I was going to sell drugs, and I was driving. I left work. It was like really late at night. I stopped at the racetrack in town, and a police officer that had arrested me prior to that, he knows me. He knows what I drive. I was so slick. So we live in the mountains, and, you know, cars get dirty. So I put dirt across my license plate so that you couldn't read it. Like a cop couldn't like type in the letters and stuff to pull up like my name. But he knew it was me because he's arrested me in that vehicle before.
Look at you go.
Yeah. So I left that racetrack and was heading out to sell a bag of dope and got pulled over. And I threw the dope out, and I remember taking this like deep breath, knowing I'm going to get arrested right now and I'm not going to get out. And it was probably like such a relief, because I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired, that I remember when I got in the back of the police car, I like took a deep breath, and I was just like, kind of just like felt like relief. I can't explain it, but it was just like relief, because I didn't know what else to do. So then I was in jail. And, South Carolina was pretty mad because I had ran from those charges. So now they are like wanting to extradite me. I have like pending charges. I also violated my probation. So now I'm looking at like a prison sentence, and all this going on. And my son is now like not in my custody. I asked my mom to fight for my son. I wanted her to get custody of him, because at the time, the person who had him, there was like, they were not wanting me to see him, and it was just like becoming where it was like not about my son, but more about like a tit for tat type of thing. And so I went to court, and my probation officer, I remember, I'll never forget it. I was in the courtroom, and at this point I didn't know like what was going to happen with my life. I was like, okay, I'm probably going to go to prison, like whatever. And I just didn't care, because I was so broken and sad, and just felt like nothing. My probation officer looked at me, and she was like, Kayla, if I could take those handcuffs off you right now, what would you do? Where would you go? Because she was just like blown away. She's like, why? She's like, Kayla, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So she looked at me, and she told me if she could take those off of me, where would I go and what would I do? And at that point, a tear rolled down my face, and I told her, I don't know. I don't have anywhere to go. I'd go right back to what I was doing. And that's when she was like, I know, but you need help. And she just started to tell me, like, this is not you, your life. She's like, this is not what your life is going to be, and you need help, but only you can make that decision. So I realized in that moment what she was doing is, even though I did not have the power of choice for my freedom, she was giving me the power of choice for what I was going to decide to do for my life. because when you make that decision, you're more invested in it than when the decision is made for you.
So true.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that at the time, but that's what she was doing. And so she had done the research and found like a treatment center in Tennessee. And she's like, I mean, she did this work. Like, she did not have to do any of this. All she had to do was be like, yep, she violated, whatever, send the extradite her and all this stuff. But she literally advocated for me to go to treatment. And so I did. And I got signed a bond release that said I will go to treatment. My mom was allowed to drive me. The moment that I finished my treatment, I had to go back to jail to then be extradited to go to South Carolina, who wanted to give me a prison sentence. So all of that's going on. And I go to Tennessee, and I begin the most healing journey I've ever experienced in my entire life. And it was incredible. It was hard, but it was incredible. And I thank God.
Where in Tennessee did you go?
Nunley, Tennessee.
Okay.
It was called The Ranch.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. And I, for the first time in my life, realized how much trauma I had been through. I realized how much healing I needed. I realized that I'm not this like horrible person that is just like, never going to ever have a good life. Like I just had so many spiritual awakenings and so much healing, and people loved me so much in that time. I had 2 therapists that were just incredible. I had a trauma therapist that worked with me and like deep trauma. Like we did EMDR.
I was going to ask you if you did EMDR.
Oh gosh. Yeah. She brought me through so much. When I first got there, my therapist was like, at the end when I left, she was like, I honestly didn't know if you were going to make it. She's like, it was literally like pulling teeth to get you to talk. Cause at that point I was so broken. I was just so broken.
Can you please describe to our listeners what EMDR is? I just think it's really important because
Yes.
It's just such a fantastic form of therapy.
It is. So EMDR is a type of therapy. It's a trauma therapy where you actually get brought through your trauma. But there's a couple ways to do it. There's like a thing that you could do with like your eyes. I did it was like a hand, like you hold the vibrations in your hand, and what it does is it like stimulates both sides of your brain, of your mind. And so when we were going through my trauma, it's amazing because what we did was like we created a safe place together, and then she brought me through like my traumatic memories, and they were like very vivid, and brought me into like this safe place. And so with it, you're able to like really recall things, and it starts to like come to you. And I don't really know how else to explain it, but it was like incredible because a lot of people don't realize that when you have trauma like that, you do store it, and you store it in your body, and you store it in your mind. Like it's not processed. And so when it's not processed, you may think it's not there because you're not recalling it or remembering it, or it's not on the forefront of your mind. But what it does is it's manifesting in your behaviors, your perceptions, like so much of like your characteristics.
It's manifested in the core of who you are.
Yes, everything of who you are. And so like a lot of my trauma had done that. It had manifested in the core of who I am. And so that's why I was really at the end of like my road, I was dealing so much with just like wanting to die, like just wanting to take my life. And so through the EMDR, I was able to walk through so much of my trauma to heal from it. And as I was healing, I was starting to want to live, and I was starting to have hope, and I was starting to like trust in this process of recovery that people were talking to me about. I had never heard of like AA, all these like 12-step fellowships. I'd never heard of, treatment, rehab, all those things were like stuff you saw in movies.
Right.
But I never like thought of those things for my own life.
I'm going to go back, and for our listeners, I knew the eye movement desensitization, but the reprocessing is the R. I couldn't think of what that stood for. So that's what that stands for. It's a psychotherapy treatment technique that helps people heal from traumas, PTSD, anxiety, and mental health disorder. Yeah. So thanks for sharing that.
For sure. Yeah. And we did a lot of psychotherapy too. So I did all kinds of wild things in therapy, which I really cannot express enough to people. Like therapy can be such a beneficial thing for individuals that have had like a lot of trauma or just like going through, whatever struggles. And so, sometimes it takes a minute to find the right therapist, because I feel like just like anything, you have sometimes people that don't go into therapy for the right reasons, or they don't have their life together or whatever. They're just not the best therapists. And we see that a lot. And so people then get discouraged about therapy, or they think like a stigma, oh, I'm not crazy, I don't need therapy. But my gosh, therapy honestly did so much for me in that time, and it helped me heal so much. And I really would not be where I'm at today if I didn't have those therapists and to have gone through that therapy that I went through. And so I started to have a lot of breakthroughs, but I was still had all of this stuff hanging over my head, right? Like, you're going to prison. I still don't know if I'm getting custody of my son, but I'm doing all of this work on myself. I'm feeling all these emotions. I'm working through the shame. I'm actually like feeling joy again, right? I'm not as like depressed. I had, it was an ugly process to go. Recovery isn't always beautiful. Like, you have to go through the mess to get to the point where, you know, you have a message. And so that kind of like was my story. And so thank God there was people that showed up in my life. My mom, my grandma, my sister, like, they really were pillars in my recovery. Honestly, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here either, because like when I was at my worst, like, they really like came in to like really love on me and to get me the help that I needed. And they would just like would tell me like, we just didn't want you to die. Like, we just really felt like you were going to die.
Well, I mean, you're so lucky to be here.
Yeah.
Especially as many times as you wanted to commit suicide. I know a lot of folks in my history and working in behavioral health and working units and intensive outpatient that have been successful.
Yeah.
And my daughter had a friend in high school that successfully committed suicide. And, you know, I mean, she was looked at as a cutter, and they oftentimes say, oh, she's bluffing. You know, she wasn't bluffing. So.
Yeah. I too, I had a friend that did in high school, and it's just like, it's just so sad because people don't realize, like, people who cut, because I was a cutter too, and people who think of suicide, like the internal pain sometimes that people are going through. Like, I remember, like, even for me, like, cutting or burning was a sense of relieving the pain. Yeah. So
believe it or not, back in my day, that was also a thing. And
really?
I personally got into that when I was around 19 years old. I was going to NC State. And I had a good guy friend who was the first guy I'd ever met who was struggling with anxiety and depression. And he was a cutter, and he showed me about it. And it was a release.
Yes, it's a release.
We worked, I mean, you can still see just a little bit on my wrist, but it was just that.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, we would take erasers and
I remember that,
doing
like
that
the erasers,
until, and it was like a release.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's been around a whole lot longer than what people think.
For sure. I think so too. I also think it's a form of harm reduction, because you, like, with cutting, you're like reducing, especially for somebody who often thinks of suicide, you're like reducing that. So you're doing as a release to relieve that pain, you know?
True.
And so because that, even when I was in treatment and I was going through with my son, I was not allowed to see him. And that was really hard too. So I was fighting all of these feelings of like, am I even worthy to be his mom? I really want to be his mom. I'm trying to do better. Am I going to get custody back of him? Am I going to have to go to prison? All of these things.
The control part of it was probably a huge part of your journey, because you cannot control outcomes.
Correct.
Only your own.
Correct.
But you cannot control the outcomes of others.
I tell people the most powerless I've ever felt was going through that whole process with my son. And I, at this point, was like doing really good. I had graduated out of treatment. Now I was in like a PHP halfway program, like the step down.
PHP stands for Partial Hospitalization Program, folks.
Yes. So now, so I'm doing really good. I'm starting to have like breakthroughs. Okay, this is a funny story though. So while I'm in treatment and I'm going through my process and I'm just like angry at the world, angry at God, but I'm starting to see like some changes and stuff, and like slowly but surely it's starting to resonate for me. The lights are coming on. I remember being outside and I was like, God, if you're real and you really want to help me and you're here, because at first I was like, why, you know, like I was just so angry. I would be cussing God out, like all these. That's why I tell people, like, go to God however you are, because trust me, he knows. And so
That's so true.
I would be outside smoking cigarettes and I'd be like, if you're real, show me a deer. Like, I want to see a deer right now. I would ask for this burning bush experience.
That is great.
Yes. So throughout all of I was in treatment for like 4 months.
God shows up in so many ways that you look back and know that he was there the whole time.
My gosh.
Because you have to be super specific in how you pray. And then sometimes you better be really careful about what you ask for.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And so,
because show me the way, God. Okay, you will be arrested tomorrow.
yes, exactly. And that was literally a gift. Like I always say, like that
Exactly.
was the gift of desperation. And it would I didn't know it was going to end up in handcuffs, but I'm grateful for that experience of being arrested.
Isn't it crazy how the rock bottom for everybody is so different?
So different. Yeah.
I mean, some people can die and come back from Narcan 20 times, and that's not a rock bottom for them.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know what people's rock bottom is ever going to be. It's always the story I want to hear from someone is what was it?
Yeah.
For you, it was the thought probably of losing your son for good.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was like it for me. I was like, if that happens, I'm done.
You're
That's
a deep down
Yeah.
mama.
Yeah.
A mama bear.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. My son is like my everything.
But that's what, when I talk about, because a lot of people say, well, she really loved her kid, then she wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the day. So we're wrapping up episode 2. Guys, we'll see you for Kayla's part 3, and this is going to be her journey to excellence. So tune in. Thank you, Kayla, for being here today, and we'll see you really soon.
Thank you.
Bye. I want to state that please do not substitute this podcast for professional therapy or treatment. The content shared here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We do ask our listeners to respect the diverse experiences of individuals and refrain from passing judgment. If you or someone you know needs professional help, please seek the guidance of a registered and qualified mental health professional. Clearly Well is brought to you by Healthy Georgia and produced by CNC Media.